My name's Jimmy Hurff, and I'm with Clearsense. So just a quick little bit about me. I introduce myself generally as a computer nerd. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, live in St. Augustine, and got a background in software development, Java, enterprise architecture, big data is something that I've started working on in the last 3 or 4 years. But I kind of balance in between the development operations space. I like DevOps. So, purpose of this slide is just to kind of give you a quick 30-second commercial on Clearsense. So Clearsense is a healthcare IT company. We basically build analytics solutions for healthcare. Our target customer would be hospitals and health systems. And Clearsense is really a predictions company. So we have a couple of clinical use cases in play using streaming data to try to predict patient deterioration. You can see the bullets here. I mean, we're a software as a service, cloud-based solution. I'm going to spend most of the time talking a little bit about the infrastructure move that we did, basically going from the public cloud to the private cloud. But I did want to kind of fall on the sword right out of the gate here a little bit and say, public cloud is awesome. I'm a big public cloud. I'm a cloud guy in general. Love the vendors in the space. So this isn't to beat up on any of them. But I do want to talk about specifically DriveScale and some total cost of ownership decisions that we made to try to go from public cloud to stuff on premises for ours. And we found DriveScale to be a very cost-effective solution, kind of part of that solution. So I'm going to kind of avoid the dramatic reveal here and say this is going to be a little bit about the DriveScale solution. So again, Clearsense, just to kind of orient you kind of up there at the top, you've got the hospitals. Hospitals and health systems could be conglomerates of many hospitals. They have point of care facilities out there, but that's our client. Our client is the hospital out there and providing care to the citizens of the United States. And then we create connectivity into their environments and then ingest data into our cloud-based platform. So Clearsense is a startup. We've got about 3 years under our belt. In 2015, we went out and kind of made our first cloud procurement. And when we did that, we started spending money month over month, with compute cycles and memory and storage. And in about mid-2016, we made our first cloud expansion. And in that cloud expansion, we saw our costs go up a multiple, several times. We went from spending around $10,000 a month to spending over $30,000 a month. And when that happened, it was a shock for us. We knew that we were going to have to go probably from public to on-prem at some point, but it happened a lot sooner than we were anticipating. And so it basically caused us to have to take a step back and evaluate our cloud strategy and go, look, as we kind of compare our current position and spend, along with what our expected customer acquisition rate is, we saw our cloud costs growing significantly, and we wanted to make sure that we were kind of prepared for that. So basically, that little red flashing thing there, my graphic artist people tell me that's to try to draw attention to the fact that, holy cow, something happened right then that we really wanted to pay attention to. And so we're very methodical in our approach. We reviewed where we were and said, is this just the cost of doing business, or could we look at different options that might make it more economically affordable for us and cost effective? And so we kind of came up with 3 sort of macro options. And I'm going to kind of go into them. I'm going to spend most of the time going into option 3 because option 3 is the one that we chose. So I'm kind of telling you in advance to pay close attention to that. But basically, option 1 is like we can stay in the public cloud, not deviate from it, kind of stay with our vendor and maybe look at altering the sorts of instance types that we're using or the services, but staying with the same vendor. That was sort of option 1A, if you will. And option 1B was change cloud vendors entirely, go to a different public cloud vendor and move our services from one to the other. And we were looking at it really from the economic standpoint. Option 2 was you go to Red Hat, you go to Dell, you say, I want to stand up a data lake, and they roll out what they call kind of their reference implementation. Here's the book to go stand up a data lake, a Hadoop data lake, and start to build workloads on your own assets. And so I really want to kind of point out this is this option 2 and option 3 are really kind of the 2 that we really evaluated because we really thought there was a better way to get more bang for our buck in terms of our spend from an infrastructure standpoint. And what I'm trying to call out in this picture here is that the idea is you scale out by adding a whole host. You add a whole new host, and then that host, it has CPU and memory and storage internal into that device. And you're sort of rigidly fixed in the ratio between your CPU cores and your memory gigs and your storage gigs. So the point is that if you're going to scale out, you have to add a whole nother device or a whole nother group of devices. And where we felt like that, just kind of looking at it more from like a theory constraint standpoint, you're going to be, one of those three dimensions is probably going to be your limiting dimension. And which one is that? Is that CPU, is that memory, or is that storage? And the truth was that we didn't really know. Our workloads were not as, not as mature as some, and so we weren't certain if we were going to be CPU bound or memory bound or storage bound. So option 3, as I kind of mentioned earlier, really was around the drive scale, kind of the drive scale strategy. And again, there's a flair for the dramatic here. Check this out. This is the drive scale piece. Drive scale comes in and sets as this. It's an interface that sits in between your storage and your compute. And so I want to take a moment and just kind of talk through some of the key points here. So in the previous slide, we were looking at, I'll just tell you, we were looking at Dell equipment. We're pretty much all Dell shops. So we were running Dell R730XD as an option 2, compared to Dell R630s, which are a smaller form factor device. But the main difference is they don't have the internal storage. We ended up going with option 3. It didn't have the internal storage. It actually is attached using the device there in the middle, the drive scale adapter. That drive scale adapter sits in between our 630 head nodes, the compute and memory nodes, to what we have JBOD chassis, just a bunch of disk chassis that have disks mounted within them. And the drive scale adapters sit in between those devices and basically do the I/O in between the storage and the RAM and the CPU. What is, kind of the reason why we chose this is this composable software infrastructure sort of idea. And what it gives us the opportunity to do is if we find ourselves to be CPU bound, we can add more 630s without having to go and add additional storage. Or if we find ourselves to be storage limited, we can go and buy more storage independently of CPU and memory. And again, we found that gave us the most cost-effective and sort of flexible strategy around our storage disaggregation sort of approach here. So again, we did choose this one, and it was really around this idea of giving us flexibility for being able to choose, and cost effectiveness was really the driver there. All right, so I want to, we talked about it, what drove it, and then, what were we successful, right? What happened afterwards? So we saw that we were able to buy a lot more computing capacity with the same dollars. In fact, we got to a place where we had 11 times more CPU, and on the order of about 12 or 13 times more memory and 18 times more storage with the drive scale solution than what we had in our public cloud offering. And the reason why that's interesting to me as the technology officer at Clearsense is that we kind of fixed our spin for a little while. And for a startup that's trying to we have to be good stewards of what we have. You can see here the before and after. We were spending approximately $40,000 a month on our cloud-based big data strategy, and afterwards that dropped to $11,000 a month spend, amortized out over a 4-year kind of lifespan for equipment. But on top of that, we had significantly more resources available to us. The performance, our latency was a lot better. We have more capacity. I mean, everything was better after the move. Because we had more resources available to use, more demand ability. And I certainly have covered a lot of ground here. Be glad to talk in more detail if you guys are interested. We're going to be over at the Drive Scale booth, but I wanted to hit home on one kind of really important point to me. Chief Technology Officer, that role. At the end of the day, I'm looking at the CEO and the CFO and the business leaders of our organization, and they're asking me whether or not we're going to be able to do. I have to deliver on the strategy for the company. And what I found in Drive Scale was I cannot give these folks the highest marks in terms of their partnership, in terms of their willingness to come in and partner with us, to come in early and to stay late and to help us get it done no matter what. As somebody who's responsible for getting it done. That was probably the most refreshing thing about working with DriveScale. Was their technology is fantastic. I don't want to talk bad about their technology, but their people really delivered on what their promises were. And so I just want to make sure that I get that across. DriveScale is a great company to work with. So with that, I think we're done. And if you'd like to talk more, we'll be over at 2:33.